One. There's been an absence. These first Mondays were definitely my favorite part of the month, and just like sometimes you go and you're like, oh, I'm a little tired. I don't want to. And you always come away energized because that's one of the things that we miss the most. It's very hard. And in fact, one of the first things on my sort of docket, I've got a long list. I'm very pent up. Um, is the sort of individual challenges. I know I've had lots and lots of calls from people that are just frustrated and sad. And, I think half the time they're just happy somebody answers the phone. So I think we're all kind of needing, I don't know, connection or each other or something. So that's definitely something we want to look at. But first of all, big and foremost is, as of last week, there were 70,000 pandemic unemployment assistance, PUA applications languishing in Salem. And it's been pretty horrific to see the sort of whistleblowers come out and talk about how incredibly poorly managed that whole system is. And we know it's new, and I've given them all kinds of credit, but I continue to push. Wyden is head of the finance committee, and I believe has some sway. I've been suggesting that just everybody, if you've got a Social Security in there and a way to get money to you, everybody should get the minimum. Nobody should, hey Brood, nobody should have to go without any longer. It's criminal. And in fact, we're going to test out little poll questions as we go along, and you should be able to see the poll question just asking if you applied for a PUA and are still waiting. I'd be interested to know of the people listening on Zoom and those coming in through Facebook. Be interesting to see if you're still waiting, because that's not good. Things that I do know, I've heard from some people that are concerned that if their claim isn't processed before July 25th, are they going to be out of luck on the PUC, which is that extra $600? And no, I've confirmed at 2 different places with Senator Merkley's office and with higher up at the OED that those are federally protected funds, and that you will get them retroactive to when you were unemployed, which for most of you is the day the music died in mid-March. So even if your claim is not processed, God help you, until after July 25th, you are still absolutely going to be paid that additional money, as well as all of the other weeks that you've claimed. You should definitely keep filing your weekly PUAs. I know it feels like screaming into the abyss, but you want to make sure that when they do finally, look at your thing, they see all of it there. You wouldn't want to have to make anybody go back and do it again, because heaven knows when they'd come back to you. They're talking about some sort of online claim form being available at some point, but God knows when. So I wish I had more information for you about the Oregon Employment Department. I think they've been shamed a lot, and I think I've been hearing or seeming to get a sense that more people are receiving some funds. So please do stay in touch with me and with MusicPortland. We love to hear when people have actually received. And we also love to pick up the phone. Sometimes people just need to talk, and we are happy to listen. So last week, this whole thing just really caught up with me, I think, emotionally. This is such a marathon that we're in. It kept on being, well, if we can just get to this, then we'll be fine. But I don't see an end in sight. And the isolation and, the inability to share what we as a community rely upon sharing, music exchanged and faces and applause and accolades and all the things that we really rely on. So as we wrestle collectively with the extended reality of this pandemic, I think the psychic and emotional toll is starting to tell. And one of the reasons I was really keen to start up the first Mondays again is so that we have a place to be talking about it. We're going to ask Austin is going to switch up a poll. We've got 60% say no on the PUA, which means they have received it. They're not still waiting. But 40% are still waiting. That's not good. So the next poll is kind of asking how we can help, how we can sort of address or acknowledge the challenge that this moment is giving us collectively. You know, do people want more opportunities, as we'll do in the meeting afterwards? Do people want more peer-to-peer kind of online conversation opportunities? What's going to happen after this this webinar, sort of one-way talking, is we'll just shift over to another thing that allows for breakouts. So we could break people into groups of 4 or 5 people, and you can talk about the things we've been talking about, or you can talk about anything you want. You can share, you know, the new bizarre recipe you made up out of the stuff you had in your refrigerator. It's the virtual equivalent of the hang time that we used to enjoy so much at MusicPortland First Mondays. So we hope that everybody will stick with us and get in there and do it. The things that we're looking at here are, you know, peer-to-peer conversations like that, or do you want more links and reminders about mental health resources? There are things that we've been noodling on that can maybe enable musical collaboration, co-writing or playing, or, you know, doing the synced up videos. Do people need sort of a creative community outlet? You know, we can have speakers come in and talk about coping. And, you know, I think it's kind of, it's global, it's bizarre. And I think the scope of it is wearing on me a little bit. So anyway, let us know in that poll if there are things that we can be doing to make everyone kind of feel more connected and more a piece of things. We're looking and seeing, yeah, the peer-to-peer conversation, that's great. Please, everybody come and join this next thing. We're gonna do this for an hour and then we'll pop over to that. And we've been doing them as huddles with the production community, and you know, sometimes it's 4 people total, sometimes it's 30 people breaking into different things, but they've really been remarkable as a way to kind of connect, not with the people you know or the people that you make special point of meeting, but somebody that you do know and you haven't thought about, but how great to be able to talk to them. So please stay with us. Yeah, it looks like that's cleared up, and I think it's the peer-to-peer, which seems to be the leader, and that's fantastic, because that's what we can do. And we can do that on an ongoing basis. We can have that be something that is available for people to hang out and talk, you know, every Thursday, whatever. Drop us a note and let us know what kind of frequency, or just knowing that you can always drop in, is a good thing for you. Next up, we've got Jim Bromberg coming from somewhere in the remote part of Washington, and he has not yet joined us, so I'm going to skip ahead to, we'll talk about venues as soon as he joins us. One of, obviously, a big thing that we need to talk about as a community is racism and systemic racism that's here in the now. And Malachi Graham, my amazing aide, as well as my daughter, put together a remarkable page on the MusicPortland site. I'll let her kind of talk about that process a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So in this particular moment where there is so much energy around identifying structural racism and our own unconscious bias, and as we were trying to think about what to do as an organization, I was seeing so many reading lists coming up about ideas for how the non-Black community can educate ourselves. And a lot of what I was seeing is very high level. Like, you see all the stuff on the New York Times bestseller list, like white fragility and how to be anti-racist. And so you want to talk about race. And I know a lot of people are getting excited about that and getting informed, which is fantastic. I'm doing that myself. But what I was really interested in digging into Portland specifically, like how do we look at this problem as something that is not just national, but we can see it manifested specifically here. So I built a page, looks like Austin has just popped it into the chat, but you can find it at musicportland.org/BLM. And I just dug in and did research on a lot of stuff. This is all stuff you could find with a Google search, but I wanted to help give a little structure for people and a little bit of, by putting things side by side, you start to see how pervasive it is in every element of our culture, but it's specifically about the history of Blackness and anti-Black racism in Portland, especially as it relates to our music scene. So that has to do with historic venues that have been shut down, development all through the East Side. I think it is really, as a student in Portland schools from first grade all the way through high school, this is something that I heard little bits and pieces of, but never in a collective way. And I think that's a big part of the problem. This page is not just about history, it's bringing things all the way up to the present day. But I think understanding that trajectory of Portland's sort of polite racism gives a lot of context to where we are right now. So that's things relating from Oregon's, like the origins of our state, like in the foundation of this state, how Oregon was created as this racist white utopia, digging into things like the development of Vanport and the Vanport flood of 1948 and what that did to the community, the history of redlining, the development of Albina as a community, and then how Portland city development decisions chipped away at that community. And then as it specifically relates to music, something that really excited me was finding out about the history of Black-owned venues, especially in that Albina area. I didn't know myself that the building that is now Left Bank, right on the end of the Broadway Bridge, was a historic jazz club that operated for a year and a half called the Dude Ranch, that had all kinds of legendary performers play there until it was shut down by the city. And actually Nat King Cole and Billie Holiday were both scheduled to play there when the venue was shut down, ostensibly because there was a shooting nearby. It's the same sort of racist policymaking. You see any excuse to shut down Black communities, you still see that to the present day. And Mara's going to talk a little bit about the report on how the hip-hop community has been policed and over-policed. So as I was putting this stuff together, I was starting to feel like almost like it was like a true crime podcast. I was like, wait, like connecting the red yarn between like housing policy and education and the historic designation of neighborhoods like Irvington, how things are policed, these buildings that I've driven by a million times, like it's all connected, like it goes all the way to the top. And like, yeah, it does. It's systemic racism. And I should have been informing myself about it sooner. So in trying to put together this page, I hope that we can start to educate ourselves, but education is just the first step. And so that's what I think Mara is going to talk about next.
Yeah, the page is phenomenal. And that you referenced something in there from Vanport Mosaic, which is an organizing group called Memory Activism. And the idea that it's not an abstract, it's not about George Floyd that you're marching right now. It should be an informed kind of continuum that you're marching for. And it feels like that just makes everything richer, and the activism that you're doing really kind of more fleshed. So yes, I think racism in Portland, there's a perception reality thing. I spend a lot of time defending and advocating for the music community, arguing that perception is different from reality. Perception is, oh, we've got a really great scene and it's kind of fun and amazing. No, it's an economic juggernaut. It's paying for a ton of what happens in this city. I think that racism and our sense of ourselves as a music community is also that same sort of conflicted dynamic, where I think we see ourselves as progressive, certainly indie, creative. It says downtown, keep Portland weird, which I had a Black man say, yeah, we've always known that's code for white. We don't call ourselves weird. It's an exclusive term. And so even though I know most people that I know are really weary of that, we cultivated a conversation that tried to get people together and say, okay, if it's not weird, what is our creative ethos? And as a mark of my own bias or tone deaf, I really kind of fell in love with the idea of fearless, the idea of being a fearless creator that's not bound by market forces or things like that. And another, wise Black man said, fearless doesn't apply to us either. So I think that even the language that we use, if we are celebrated as an indie town, it is worth noting that the Billboard magazine Indie Power 100 doesn't include a single Black person, not one out of 100 people, 100 acts. It's indie is feeling a little like weird, like maybe it's exclusive in a way that we didn't realize. But I think all of these things start to come together, and the more that you look and the more that you think, and spend a lot of time in the past month really doing self-assessment and just saying, there's no excuse, I should have known more. And now we have an opportunity as a community to know more. Because hip hop is the most listened to genre in the United States. And pre-COVID, there were more than 1,000 shows advertised every month in Portland, and less than 5% of them were for hip hop. So there's a problem with that. And the reality is that the voices of our hip hop artists are gaining ground nationally, but they continue to be underrepresented in our city. So Amine and Dodger and Dante and Rashid Jamal and Mike Capes and Cool Nuts and Carmen Rivera and so many others, they're taking their Portland experiences and speaking them elsewhere. And the fact is that these performers manifest their excellence despite Portland, not because this is a warm bastion. We as a music community were diminished by not actively lifting them up. So equity isn't an abstraction. It's about things that are it's not about things that are happening elsewhere, and it's not even about an uncomfortable history. It's an opportunity in the present moment. And it really does, I think, present an incredible chance for us to grow and evolve as a music culture and as a community of righteous humans, which we should be. So Maliki mentioned the hip hop and the police report. There was a 2014 report on the policing of hip hop events, and it's on that musicportland.org/BLM. And this report confirmed that the police overreact in full combat gear, which is the whole defund conversation, but at the hint of trouble at a hip hop show, rather than engaging with the community to diffuse issues earlier, participate as part of the community. They come in guns blaring. And this relationship over time and continues to heighten the antipathy, and it denies any chance for positive change or any kind of renewed trust. And it's getting worse, as we see every night with the protests. It's grim, but it's all connected. So music and racism and here and now, it's all the same thing. The report concluded that the lack of regulatory documentation and transparency in reporting was a major impediment to improving relations. So they said, just write down all the regulations, make them clear, document them, and then make it clear also whenever they're applied. So you can look and say, no, it feels like they're doing it to us more, but in fact, it's spread out pretty evenly. 5 years later, they hadn't done it. So at the end of last year, MusicPortland, it was the thing that prompted the MusicPortland to create the Music Policy Council that has offered and worked with 3 city commissioners to look at all permitting and licensing and enforcement issues and departments to try and rationalize it and to try and write it down in a way that could say, city, I know you haven't made it a priority in 5 years, and you're still saying that you don't have any budget for it. Well, here's the industry stepping up to say, we will do a bunch of the heavy lifting, and we will work with your departments, and we can make what this city authored thing, make sure that it's actually manifested.
Looks like we have a quick question from Natasha Pinedo in the chat, which is an excellent one. How is MusicPortland looking to diversify itself as an organization?
Fair enough. The establishing group of the Music Policy Council was 60% African American, 60% Black on that committee because we knew these were the kinds of issues we really wanted to make sure we were in and on. We have currently one Black person. We would love to get more. Anybody who is really interested in participating with our leadership, we welcome you. I see that there's more coming in from Andre. Yeah, Andre, so Andre Middleton says, as a Black man, I must acknowledge that diversity and anti-Blackness should include all BIPOC artists and audiences to a much bigger, that are much bigger than hip hop. While hip hop is the invention of the Black experience, it's grown to be a worldwide form of expression. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That's absolutely true. On the page, there's a section at the bottom targeted towards next actions, which I think, yeah, Mara's in the middle of speaking to now, but part of that, Mississippi Studios made an amazing saved Instagram story with 50 plus artists of color that are Portland based. And that's definitely a great reminder that it is not, hip hop is not exclusively Black, and Blackness is not exclusively hip hop. Those things are not necessarily equated. I think making sure that the hip hop community is fairly represented and that those shows have an opportunity to happen is a really important part of our work, but absolutely we need to acknowledge that those things are not one and the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And speak of Mississippi, here's the devil himself, Jim Bromberg. Welcome, Jim. I'm gonna round up the thing that I'm talking about, and then we'll loop back to venues. But the part I'm talking about now is we educate ourselves, we look at our world, we look at it with clear eyes, and then how do we act on it? So the first thing we did was make the Music Policy Council, in large part in response to the policing report relative to hip hop. The next thing I think that we need to do is really looking at how we assess and how transparent we are as an organization and as a city. So the reality is that Portland still behaves like a small town. I mean, everybody, you're always like, oh, you know, the best way to get a job is you know somebody and something happens, or even as we were talking about creating a directory of producers and studios, even some of the production community was like, you know, I mean, it's fine. You just kind of like, you find out, you meet people. That I think that Portland's provincialism systemically excludes people of color. Our commitment,
Totally.
you know, so we've been talking about making an industry directory for a while now, but when you look at it through this lens, it's even more important. That's going to become a priority, absolutely, and we want to make sure that we include everybody in that in a way that makes it accessible and levels the playing field.
Totally. It's a total good old boys network. It's just it's this kind of smiling, kind front porch version of it. Like,
Totally.
oh, we're so nice. We're Twee. We're Portland.
Yeah.
Oh, you know who you need to know, you know, but yeah, there's a total good old boys network here in Portland that needs to be greatly expanded and cracked open.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you do that by shining a light on it. So everybody listening, if you have not shared, I'm going to assume everybody listening has made a Music Portland profile. If you haven't, go to Music Portland right on the front page, make a profile. What that does is it means you raise your hand and say, I'm in the music community here. That's what it says. And that data is invaluable to help us really both assess who we are as a community and to make sure that we're representing in a way that kind of confounds this weird racist provincialism that we've enjoyed. I see somebody raising their hand. I'll wait for the team to get a figure on that. The other thing is mentorship and access. When we were setting up Gear Fest last year, we were stunned to find that not a single instrument or gear manufacturer in the city was Black, out of more than 100 of them. And so the question we have is, how do we make sure in our manufacturing sector that we're sharing skills and business stories with youth of color to inspire and model invention? You know, as my husband said when he ill-advisedly started a microphone company. He's like, I'm a cocky white guy. I'm like, hell, I don't know what I'm doing. I can do that. How do we make sure that all people understand that they can make those leaps of faith? And also we need to make sure that job opportunities are transparent and accessible to people of color. It can't be, hey, I heard about a job. Let's make sure that we're getting the word out there as much as possible and trying to level the playing field. And the last thing, and Jim, you can jump in on this one, is sort of analyzing our systems. Beyond the sort of who you know provincialism, what are the systemic deficits in our music culture that have been exclusionary, not by design, but by effect? We need to look at how we do everything that we do and really remember that we've got to break some things to make them more equitable. So there's another polling question that Austin's going to put up that is really asking, when you think about our music, our Portland music ecology, where are the biggest opportunities to improve racial diversity and equity? You know, is it around venue programming? Because the venues are already working hard on this. They've had, the last couple of years, they've spent a lot more time. There's even been talk, Jim, I think, of mentoring or of supporting a Black-owned venue, which there isn't yet, and there should be.
Is this poll out? Is this poll happening now, or is this poll?
Yep. You know, it's right now.
Can we add a category?
What is it?
Venue ownership. There is not a single, you've probably already covered this, but in the entire state of Oregon, there isn't a single venue that's owned by people of color. They're in the entire state of Oregon. And that's really, it's really embarrassing, actually. Yeah. There's a partial ownership of Stages 722, which is a new venue in Southeast Portland, but a lot of people haven't been there yet. And the controlling partner is it looks like me.
Yeah.
I want the city to invest in this, and Prosper Portland and I have discussed it. I think you've discussed it a bit with them too, Mira. And anybody, if you know people out there who are people of color who have any interest in starting a venue, all of us who, I mean, you're not going to have any hurdles in terms of the ownership. People like David Lycan and myself would love there to be a more diverse array of ownership entities out there. So, and we're happy to mentor or invest or anything in that. So, you know, we're not saying do it our way, but like, we're here if you need a resource, if you know somebody who's thinking about starting a venue, or, you know, it's sometimes venues start in coffee houses or they start in a bar and they become and they grow. I mean, Mississippi Studios started as a recording studio. It was just a 45 capacity room that we had that was downstairs from the recording studio. And I never knew that it was going to be a music venue proper. It just sort of grew into that. So if you know somebody who has a business and they've got an interest and you're a musician and they're a person of color and you think, hey, you know, it'd be really cool if you had a venue, I'm happy to help. And we have a lot of resources now because we are recently energized with the help of Mira and on all of you. I'm looking at some of the names of the participants on here. I don't know you all, but there are a lot of people on here who I've spoken to over the years who have a ton of good ideas and have worked their asses off in these venues as musicians, bartenders, or both, Natasha. And so it's just like, let's pour some energy into this. And I don't know exactly what to do. I don't know what the right course is, but whatever the course is, I think you'll find a lot of support for that statewide and in the city of Portland.
Yeah, and taking this moment and really using it to create new approaches and to acknowledge old approaches that haven't been sufficient. And I think, Jim, you're right, the energy is there. I think people are really focused and want to make the right changes.
What's that ownership for that? If this poll is a long-term poll, is there any way to add ownership or business ownership or venue ownership in general? No. Or is that?
We're gonna be posting these same questions out into the ethosphere. So we'll make sure that we add it when we do it there. For this is, I think, just available to the 26th on the webcast. I don't know if it's even available through Facebook, but
I don't think so. We are also getting some really interesting stuff coming in the chat. Some great points. Friends of Noise says we need to expand arts infrastructure beyond the downtown core.
Mhm.
We are definitely seeing people weighing in on venue ownership. A note that Portland Playhouse is an incredibly active space for BIPOC performers, and the current artistic director is BIPOC. And Natasha adds that diversity in talent buying and bookers is a really huge thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and and this is exactly what we need to be talking about, and then having it all documented, and then holding all of us to account. So when we come back together next month, let's have some information to share. Um, let's have some more movement in the right direction. Um, and let me see. I think that's it. But clearly, we're talking about actions, not just education, but actions. When people join up in the next session, the peer-to-peer conversation, we want to hear from everybody. We want to know what we're not thinking of, and how you want to help, and what we can do to make this the music city that all of us deserve. So I'm going to now, since Jim is with us, Jim was the spearhead for the Independent Venue Coalition. When the shutdown happened, it became quite clear there needed to be somebody who was laser focused on venue issues, and specifically with venue owners, as opposed to managers or any of the other people in it. And he's been just masterful and dogged in the extreme, really fighting for venues. And he'll talk about sort of how venues are defined. But thank you to everybody who has, heard our call or IVC's call to write to your state representatives. Right now, as Jim will talk about, Portland has been great. You guys are awesome. But right now, the last thing that can still make a difference is no more Portland. We want to make sure that if you have friends in Astoria or Ashland or Baker or Enterprise or any of them, make sure that they are writing to their representatives and letting them know that live music and live performance in these venues is absolutely vital to their life as Oregonians. Because we want to make sure that the state representatives really understand it is a statewide issue. With that, I'm going to let Jim give us an update on all that's been going on in his world.
Hi, I'm Jim Bromberg, and I own Mississippi Studios in Rev Hall, and I have no notes or preparation for this because I was going to do it at 7. I thought it was at 6, and then it got moved to 7. So I'm like, oh, great, I'll run some errands. I will say that the most eye-opening thing about getting all these venues together, because we're just a scrappy bunch of venue owners and operators. Operators are part of our thing too. You don't have to own it, because it's true that some venue owners don't take a terribly active role in their venues. They sort of have, I don't know, put themselves out the pasture, so to speak, a couple of them, but they still are independent. And Oregon has this amazing thing. There are 2 things I learned that were amazing about Oregon. First of all the venues in Oregon are independent, and that's totally unique. And I know that because I'm part of NEVA too, as many of you are probably part of NEVA, or at least paying attention to what the National Independent Venue Association is doing. Their main battle in most cities is how are the little guys going to make it against the Live Nations and the AEGs, that duopoly, or corporate owned structures, or people who have a whole shit ton of money to throw around, and they just sort of do a venue as a hobby, and they compete with people whose life's passion it is. But Oregon's unique. Oregon doesn't have that bad element. Oregon's all independent. Live Nation was gonna come here, but they pulled out when COVID happened. So there was a great thing happening where some people were gonna take over the Lloyd Center and make it into like a community center. And then Live Nation came in and threw a bunch of money at it, and then they had the rights to it and they tied it up. But the rumor is that Live Nation is out of there. So I'm trying to keep my ear to the ground about what might happen in there. My friend Edie Mondonay was talking about doing an all BIPOC owned business structure in there that would feature a venue. That would be cool. So that's the future. We want to keep Oregon independent. It's what makes us special. I mean, a lot of the charm of Portland, I'm sure a lot of the reason you guys all moved here, or if you were born here, things that you celebrated growing up, those those front porches and that weirdness and that sort of bohemian vibe that Portland has is getting scrunched in by corporate interests. But as venues, we can kind of fight to keep it out, and we've done a pretty good job of that. The other thing we've already touched on, the other thing that I learned in getting to know all these other venue owners around the state is that they're all white.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to do something about that. It's kind of ridiculous. There should be something out near Warm Springs, for example, that is a place for performances to happen by people on the reservation, you know, so that they can share things and make money off of tourism, just like everybody else does. There should be something in North Portland. There once was. The Cotton Club, amazing. Paul Knowles, legendary. Incredible thing. There used to be diversity in venues in Portland. There isn't anymore. And I'm not a historian. I don't know exactly what happened, but this is the situation now. So I hope y'all can help spread the word about that. I've been talking to other venue owners in town about that, and it's definitely a thing. There's a shortage of venues. As any of you know who've been looking for a gig, I was in your shoes when I first came to Portland, always looking for a gig. I came here as a working musician. 100% of my income was made by just doing gigs. That has kind of phased out as I have kids, so I don't do live gigs all the time. But I do still know that when you're looking for a gig, there's a shortage of venues, and we need more venues. So there's no argument against this. It's just a matter of we get COVID over with, and then we immediately hit the streets trying to find the next great Portland venue. Or well, maybe we don't. I'm not part of that. You hit the streets. You and people that you know. So anyway, I'm just here to answer questions about what's been going on with the IVC. A lot of you probably get our newsletter. If you don't get the IVC newsletter, you can do so by going to the independentvenuecoalition.com or voicevenues.com and be hip to the advocacy we're doing. Mira called me masterful. I am a not masterful lobbyist. I don't know fuck shit about lobbying. I am horrible at it. Mira has been there when I've walked out of meetings because I don't feel like being diplomatic. But I am dogged, and I've gotten on these people, and at the state level, they've listened. And at the state level, we're doing pretty well. And I think we're gonna have a vote next week where there's gonna be some support for Oregon's independent venues. At the city level, I've kind of thrown my hands up and walked away. I don't know if have you already talked about that, Mira?
Nope.
Mira is the masterful one. She knows how to talk about leveraging, and she knows how to talk about money, corporate dollars being integrated and put to a higher purpose. She knows how to talk about that stuff. I'm a little more hot-headed, and I gotta say, Mira, you've done a masterful job of keeping the city on the hook for investing in saving these businesses that employ so many people in the service industry and give so many musicians a stage. So I don't have much else to say other than it's a state battle, and I would love it if you keep writing your emergency board members. The emergency board is the entity that's probably going to vote at the end of this week or the beginning of next week to do a thing called life support for venues. And that's going to be a small amount of money that goes all over the state to specific venues. So Lincoln City has 2 community theaters, for example, the Lincoln City Cultural Center, and the other one I can't remember the name of. Down the coast, up and down the coast, there's all these little theaters. Those are part of this too. They're places where people come together in their communities and they enjoy time experiencing a cultural event, and it's also places where musicians can tour around and make a stop and play at. So it's music and theater venues, and it's from little places like that down Lincoln City to Portland Center Stage, Revolution Hall, the Roseland, and the Laurel Thirst, Turn, places where beginning musicians have their first gig, and places where people who are making it on a national or international level have their grand triumphant return to Portland. All of these, as I said earlier, are independent, and we're fighting for them on a state level.
Yeah, it's been great too, watching the evolution of the community from the beginning. Jim obviously was talking to people like him, privately owned, independent venues, and I think as the story grew into be both, privately owned and nonprofit venues, and then also adding in many of the theater venues and other kinds of performance. And it's been really interesting to see this community kind of congeal into a pretty mighty force that really is very, very much distributed around the state. So everybody keep good thoughts. Contact at least 2 people that you know somewhere else in the state of Oregon and tell them it's absolutely important that they write to their representative and to go on to voice venues. Is the other one IVC? What is the?
Independentvenuecoalition.com. They both go to the same place. And there's a map of venues. I see a comment from Mir. Mir, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. Non-white venue owner here. Tell us about it. Chat it up.
Yeah.
Because,
Mir, please make sure that you join us in the next thing so we can be having a conversation about that.
Yeah, and so it has seriously been an issue for us. Which venue?
Yeah, which venue?
And I may be overgeneralizing because what I've run into is the venues that are able to get aid, that is relief, are the dedicated venues. Those are the venues who cannot convert. So here's an example. The Alberta Street Pub, great place, wonderful music venue. Ezra does a great job, recently has done a great job. He took it over from other people who did a great job too. But it's a music venue, but it's also a bar. They can function as a bar without opening the music venue and just increase their seating during COVID times. What we don't have is any dedicated, that is music venues that just can't open at all. Like you can't open the Aladdin Theater during this COVID crisis. You cannot open the Revolution Hall. Louis Longmire and his partners aren't going to open the Laurel Thirst because they have specific views about what it means to be a bar and alcohol and all and stuff. So the Laurel Thirst is going to remain closed. So I consider it to be a dedicated music venue. But anyway, so the Steep and Thorny, I got to check that out.
I know, it's totally cool.
This is great. So this, like I said before, though, this is how these things get started. In the beginning of Mississippi Studios 18 years ago, it's hard to believe, but it's been 18 years. When I first started that, I would never have considered us to be a music venue. Even in our first 3 years, I said, well, we're a recording studio, and downstairs sometimes we have shows go on, and I sell beer out of a cooler that I'm sitting on while I mix the sound. But that's how these things get started. And I don't know what the Steep and Thorny is. Where are you? Tell us about yourself, because I want to know all about it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since it's owned by a person of color. And I've been told repeatedly by the city of Portland and by my colleagues that there just aren't any. So let's support you. Let's support anybody who wants to start a new one, or anybody who was maybe there before that fell under the radar or through the cracks. Because like Mira said before, it's a bit of a good old boys club. And there are all these tight relationships, you know, and I'm not dissing anybody, because if I did, I'd be dissing myself. I'm part of that. But if you know Larry Crane, or you know whoever it is that you want to get a record recorded, or get an indie label deal or something like that, you just kind of go through your friends and go through your connections, because Portland was this beautiful village of connectedness before. But it's a city, and it's a diverse city, so there needs to be all the resources need to be laid out. And Mira, I think you're doing an amazing job. Team Mira, the people you're working with are incredible, and you're doing an incredible job of putting together resources so that people who aren't part of this little tight-knit community can come in and say, hey, I've got a voice, I've got a talent, I've got a point to make. Hip-hop artists, new genres of music artists are gonna come in now, I think, and be able to open this guide and be like, oh, wow, these people all produce, these people all record, these people all engineer, and I can choose from them, and I can call them up and see if they're friendly, see if they're hip to what I'm doing. That'll be a great thing to have.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important. The conversation, it's interesting, Jim and I dividing and conquering on our advocacy for venues to the state versus the city. Part of the challenge is because Music Portland has been so city focused, and the story for music in our city is different. So I was going to actually share there we go. So this is a thing that Music Portland put together, and that the IVC and I have used for advocacy specifically in Portland, because it goes really fast. Let's see, how can I do this? There we go. So some of you may have seen this in social media. I looked for 2 years to find a diagram like this, and I couldn't. And it really is just talking about the fact that as the economy of music has changed, live venue really represents a primary income source. And if musicians aren't performing gigs and earning money that way, they're not making records, they're not hiring studios, they're not, working with labels or hiring videographers. The whole ecosystem kind of starves. So the point that we were making to the city really was this idea that it's not just the internal industry that spider web represents, but that our music economy here directly impacts tourism, our larger economy, and our community. So it's a place where people want to visit, and there's huge amounts of money that come into the city with people that want to be here, and they're paying for taxis and ride shares and food and hotels and everything. And Travel Portland has absolutely acknowledged that our music tourism is a big thing. We had planned this year to be doing some direct assessment of it, but we're a very young town. Our town attracts younger people with disposable income that are consistently looking for music experiences. And the city acknowledges that. And much of that is built on our international cachet as a place where music is authentic and, accessible and, kind of intimate rather than the big concert venues. And if we don't protect our independent venues, then all of this goes away. All of this reputation and cachet is squandered. In terms of the economy, it's notable that 4 out of 5 of the fastest growing metro areas in the country are celebrated music cities. Only one of them, and I leave it to you to decide, only one of them has never had any public support. No support for our independent music economy has ever been given in Portland. So this support of venues will be the very first time that that's happened. I think there's a convenience. People kind of say, oh, music, that's part of arts and culture. But we don't, the for-profit music industry doesn't get RAC money. So it's something that we definitely are trying to change. But our music economy actually drives our corporate competitiveness. We've confirmed with the Portland Business Alliance, who doesn't confirm anything, that it's a competitive advantage for a business that's trying to get millennial talent and young, competitive talent. They want to come to Portland. And it's not because we have an opera. It's because we have this dynamic music culture. All of these places have confirmed that it's part of the reason that our city has boomed, but our music ecology, none of the players have shared in the prosperity. So there's a real opportunity, and I think a real sea change from our candidate forum that we had previously to the work that Jim has done to expose what the venues do around community. So it's a place, we don't have a single street where all the venues are. They're distributed throughout the city. They define neighborhoods. They are gathering places. They are like secular churches. And this is a big part. If you're in Portland, these places are important to you. They also host an insane number of nonprofit gatherings and cause-based events. And all of them, and in many cases they're giving them at discounts or in-kind donations, or they've just been a phenomenal community partner, and that also has not been acknowledged. So we've had to sort of bring all of this to the fore with Portland to say, we're not just our handout, we've been generating huge economic impact for you. We've helped to boost your prosperity, we build tourism, we knit your community, and now we need your help. And fingers crossed all around. The state, I think, is looking more promising than the city to date, but we will keep pushing on these buttons and others. So it's worth fighting for, and we are doing that. So that is, Austin, have you got the link for the next gathering? We want to start, okay, there it is in the chat. If people go and click into that, I believe it will, it asks you to register, but you just put your name and stuff. And the password is PDX, all caps. Let's see. Oh, interesting. Yes, Andre, hopefully you come into the chat room, and then we'll all talk through. That's a great idea. Oh, Judy from Huntsville, Alabama, who I talked to this morning. Hello, Huntsville. Judy was very nice. They're doing their own thing. And we're actually, Portland's working with a lot of different cities, trying to figure out how to support our music ecologies. And it's a very open and sort of sharing sort of a community. So I'm thrilled to be working with Huntsville and others. Let's all join in. Jim, did you want to join us for the conversation? Okay,
Yeah.
See that link? You can drop off of this one and hit that link that Austin has put there on the side. First Monday, July breakout.
Andre, I don't want them to drink $20 worth of booze. They'll be drunk.
No, just charge more for the booze.
Okay. You're talking like a true concert promoter now. We'll bring them in. We'll bring in the drinkers. Okay, so what do we do here? We jump,
All right.
jump over? We're jumping out?
Yeah, see the third from the bottom comment from Austin. Click on that link. It allows you to register. Just say your name and come on.
Austin, are you Austin with the headphones on there?
That's Austin.
Hey, Austin, how you doing? I've
Hello.
heard your name. You're doing amazing work.
He's the guy that gets everything done, that guy.
I know. That's what Mira says. Okay.
Sometimes. All right. So if everyone will head over there to start the next piece of this puzzle, we gotta end
Okay,
this
do you
one.
want me to hang here until the stragglers are out?
Nope. Just
Okay.
we're gonna kick everyone out right now.
Okay, all right, there we go.